Welcome to a space where quiet stories speak the loudest, where music, memory, and love intertwine in every line. Before we begin the story of Elias and his silent little girl, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next tale waiting to find its way into your heart. Now, let the story begin. Mornings in the cold suburbs often start with the whistling wind slipping through old wooden porches and sunlight slicing through dusty window panes. But in a small music store nestled in the heart of Bellwood, mornings don't begin with wind or light, they begin with sound. The soft hum of a guitar string vibrating under a man's fingers blended with the subtle clink of metal and wood like a heart sighing after a long night of silence.
She's a little flat again today.
Elias, 38, lean-faced, with tousled brown hair that looked like it hadn't met a comb in days, was bent over a vintage Fender. His thick, charcoal grey sweater hugged his frame. Sleeves rolled up to reveal rough hands, veined and worn, like a living sheet of music written by time and labor. By the large window, a little girl sat on a low wooden stool. Around 8 years old, her brown curls framed a face with wide, deep eyes, like she carried a silent universe behind them.
Anna, Elias's only daughter. She didn't speak, never had. Born mute. And yet, somehow music was the one thing she could say in her own way.
Every morning, Anna made her way to the old upright piano in the shop's corner, the same one her mother used to play when she was alive. It was a worn Yamaha, its black coat faded, the ivory keys now a yellowed cream, faint scratches on its body like time's fingerprints. She placed her hands on the keys gently, as if touching a memory. A melody flowed out. Nothing technical, nothing polished, just raw, honest notes, clumsy, yet full of feeling. Elias stopped what he was doing and looked at his daughter. He leaned against the workbench, listening in silence like a believer stilled by a whisper from the divine.
Play a little more for me, sweetheart.
Anna turned around, her eyes glistening in the morning light. She smiled, then nodded. Her tiny fingers pressed the keys again. And Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star rang out slow, poetic, as if she wasn't playing to remember the song, but to remember her mother. Elias looked at the piano, and for a moment, the past swept in like wind flinging open the doors of memory. She used to sit in that very spot.
If I'm ever not here, let our daughter play. Don't teach her with words. Let the sound do it.
Elias froze, his chest tightened like stone. It had been 8 years since Claire passed, the woman who once sang lullabies in musical notes, who gave him Anna, then left this world the same day. The music stopped. Anna stood and walked to her father. No words, no sound. Just a small arm slipping around his back, holding tight. Elias closed his eyes, took her hand, and kissed it.
Thank you, my little angel.
In the golden light streaming through the shop windows and the scent of aged wood and strings, another morning began. No mother, no spoken words, but there was music. And there was love. After a simple breakfast of toast and orange juice, Elias sat at the grand piano in the center of the shop. Anna remained on the stool beside him, her legs swinging freely in the air, doodling absent-mindedly in a small notebook. Outside, the morning was misty, pale, cold light seeped through the glass, casting a silvery hue over every grain of wood in the shop. A small wind chime on the porch swayed gently like echoes from the past, trying to find their way home. Elias placed his hands on the keys. The first notes came low and somber, like a sigh too old to name.
It wasn't a song. Not really. Just fragments of melody, spilling out of memory disjointed, ghostly, like those first rain-soaked nights he spent awake after Claire passed.
A song with no name, like grief with no voice, like goodbye left unsaid. Elias closed his eyes, letting the sound lead him back. In the early days after losing his wife, he barely touched a single instrument in the store. Every guitar string was a cut, every piano key, a breath Claire had left behind. There was a time he thought of closing the shop, moving back to the city, finding another job, burying himself in busy days to forget. But then Anna cried. Not with sound, but with her eyes, with her. She wouldn't leave the piano, wouldn't abandon the place that once held her mother's warmth. So Elias stayed. In those first months after Claire's death, the music in the shop echoed emptiness. Elias played alone. Anna listened. Then one day, she placed her own hands on the keys. No one had shown her how. No one needed to. She listened with her heart and played with something Elias couldn't name, only feel. Love. A single tear slid down Elias's cheek, landing on a key. The note cracked, delicate as a star, breaking open. He didn't wipe it away, didn't hide it from Anna. There was nothing to conceal, not in front of his daughter. The only piece left from a life he once had. Anna stopped her drawing, looked up. She didn't ask, just stood, walked over, climbed onto the bench beside him. She placed her hand on his, then nodded. He understood.
I still haven't gotten used to her absence. Kiddo, it's been 8 years, but it still feels like yesterday.
Anna picked up her notebook, quickly sketching a heart, a piano, and 3 figures standing together, a woman with long hair, a man holding a guitar, and a little girl holding both their hands. Elias chuckled, soft and bittersweet. He ruffled his daughter's hair.
Do you miss her?
Anna nodded. Her eyes shone with a tenderness that tugged at his soul. No one taught her how to love, but Elias knew Claire was still there in the beating of Anna's heart, in the songs she played, in the drawings she left on fogged window panes. He looked around the store. Rows of instruments lined the walls. Every piano, every violin, every guitar, Claire had chosen them all. She wasn't just a musician, she was the spirit of this place. She once said music was the only thing that made her feel truly free. Even when she was pregnant with Anna, she played every day, tired, heavy. But each night, her melodies filled the bedroom in place of lullabies. And when Anna came into the world, Claire never made it back home. A postpartum hemorrhage took her life, stole every hope they had for a future together. All Elias could do was hold a fragile newborn in his arms and grasp Claire's fading hand.
I couldn't stay as long as I promised, but Anna will take my place. Promise me, don't teach her with words. Teach her through music. Will you?
Elias once thought he'd broken that promise, that he wasn't strong enough. But today, as he watched Anna at the piano, heard her voiceless laughter echo in the shop, he knew Claire was right.
Music was their sacred language, No pronunciation, no explanation.
Elias placed his hands on the piano again, playing the unfinished composition Claire had once written a song for their daughter that she never completed.
He added an ending, slow, gentle, like a final breath transforming into a new beginning.
Anna listened, then closed her eyes. Her head swayed slightly with the rhythm. Not a word was said, but the entire room seemed to breathe in unison, full, quiet, deep as the sea. Elias stopped playing. He turned to his daughter and placed a hand on her cheek.
Your mom once said some things only music can preserve. Today, I believe her.
Anna took his hand and held it tightly. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall. Tiny white flakes settled on the awning, on the glass, and vanished in silence. Elias stood, sighed for a while, then smiled.
All right, let's get the shop ready. Kiddo, we've got customers coming.
Anna jumped down from the bench and ran to the corner, gently polishing a violin with a soft cloth as if she understood everything that had just happened, as if she too was trying to hold on to something fragile within the fading notes. And in that shop full of instruments, in the stillness of winter, a man and his mute daughter continued their story in wordless sound, and a love that had never left. By midday, when the sun had finally shed its pale veil and the wind on the porch had settled, the wind chime above the front door gave a soft ring, clear and crisp, like a spoon tapping gently against a glass. The wooden door swung open. A man in a dark brown coat stepped inside, followed by a teenage boy around 16. The man had a square jaw, a clean-shaven face, and eyes that scanned the shop with the discerning gaze of someone who knew music. Elias looked up from the violin he was tuning and offered a practiced smile.
Afternoon, can I help you?
The man didn't answer right away. He strolled slowly past the rows of guitars, nodding slightly at each one, then came to a stop in front of the upright piano in the corner, the very one that belonged to Claire.
Anna was nearby, quietly sketching something in her little notebook. She paused, lifting her head to study the stranger. The man stepped closer to the piano, his eyes drifting over its faded wood. The scratches, the yellowed keys.
This piano, is it for sale?
Elias froze for a moment. His hands hovered in the air, as if someone had just interrupted a melody he'd been playing in his mind.
No, sorry, that one's not up for sale.
May I ask why?
It was my wife's. She used to play it every day. I keep it for my daughter.
I see. I was just asking. But if you ever change your mind, I'd be willing to offer a good price.
Elias didn't answer at first. Then he shook his head, firm and calm.
Sorry, it's not an item for sale. It's a memory.
Anna looked at her father, her eyes glowing like she had just heard a silent symphony. She stood, walked to the piano, and gently rested her hand on its smooth, aged surface. The man watched her for a long moment. Then he pulled a business card from his coat pocket and placed it on the counter near Elias.
If you ever change your mind, call me. I don't want it for investment or decor, just because it reminds me of something old I once lost.
Elias didn't even glance at the card. He gave a polite nod. The man took the cue and turned to leave. At the door, he paused, voice dropping.
My name's Richard Whitmore.
The door closed behind him. The bell rang again, this time with a deeper tone, like the fading echo of something left unsaid. Elias looked at the business card, still sitting there. Richard Whitmore. The name stirred something faintly familiar. but he couldn't place it. Beside him, Anna had gone back to her notebook. She drew a piano with a giant X slashed across it. Then she held it up for her dad to see. Elias chuckled.
That's right. No one's taking it out of here, kiddo.
But inside, he wasn't entirely at ease, but something about the name, about the man's eyes, as if that piano carried a story he hadn't yet been told.
Still, this wasn't the time to think about that. He turned back to his work. Outside, a bird called out across the midday quiet, and inside Elias's music shop, one truth held steady. Some things aren't for sale, some things are meant to be kept at any cost. Evening crept slowly over Bellwood. The sunlight stretched like warm honey across grey rooftops, moss-covered steps, and the glass panes of the little music shop. In that light, everything seemed wrapped in a thin layer of gold tender, fleeting and cruel in its beauty, because it would vanish in a few short hours, like a cherished memory. Elias sat cross-legged on the floor, hunched over a large cello with its bridge removed. Worn rubber gloves clung to his hands. A cloth and a scattered array of tiny tools surrounded him like the relics of some ancient musician, a craftsman living between music and silence. On the bench behind him, Anna curled beneath a thin blanket, still clutching her sketchbook like it was part of her body. Though only 8, and without a voice, she seemed to understand her father better than anyone. She always knew when he needed quiet, when he needed a look of encouragement, and when her silent giggle was all it took to keep the room breathing. The wall clock read 4:35 p.m. Outside, the crunch of tires over gravel rolled by in rhythm. A few school kids passed with backpacks bouncing, laughter spilling into the street. The sound barely made it through the double-paned glass, a soft background track reminding Elias the world still moved outside. But for Elias, time wasn't measured by clocks, it was counted in chords, in the breath of customers, in Anna's silent joy, and the quiet spaces between songs. He carefully brushed inside the cello's soundbox, wiping away the fine dust that had settled over years. This cello belonged to a woman in her 70s, 4 blocks away. She said it used to be her late husband's, long gone before Elias ever came to town. Elias wasn't just a repairman, he was a restorer of memories. Every time he brought an instrument back to life, he wasn't just returning its voice, he was waking something deeper: regret, joy, love. It was how he paid his dues to life. 3 days ago, he'd fixed an old mandolin for a man whose hands could no longer strum because of arthritis. A week before that, it was a broken violin a child had dropped. He never charged much. Never did. Sometimes he only asked for what people could offer: a loaf of bread, a bundle of fresh vegetables, or just a grateful handshake. People called Elias a fool, doing art in a tiny town, raising a special needs child who needs principle when you're barely getting by. But Elias didn't see it that way.
He didn't live to get rich. He lived to preserve what was beautiful, even if it was just a little ukulele, or the quiet exhale of a happy customer. This afternoon, after finishing 3 repair jobs, Elias still had a piano lesson with Mrs. Merrill's grandson. And tonight, a new student, 12-year-old Ben, shy but whose eyes lit up whenever he saw a guitar string.
Elias stood, washed his hands, and wiped sweat from his brow. Anna waved him over using sign, then pointed to her belly.
Got it. Pie or mac and cheese?
Anna held up 2 fingers like she was saying, "Both." Elias burst out laughing.
What are you running this place now, princess?
She nodded confidently, then went back to her notebook, sketching a guitar with a little price tag hanging from it. Beneath it, a scribbled image message. Not for sale. Belonged to Mum. Elias stepped into the small kitchen, put on a pot to boil, and while waiting for the noodles, flipped open the shop's financial ledger. The numbers sprawled across the page, messy and real, nothing like the clean lines of musical notes. Rent had gone up last month, utilities, repair materials, Anna's sign language tutoring, all of it stacking like a dissonant chord waiting for resolution. He sighed and closed the book. But then he looked at Anna bouncing a wooden spoon in rhythm, tapping her feet to a melody only she could hear, and he smiled again. She was the most beautiful song he'd ever known. After dinner, Elias packed up his tools into an old leather bag and slung it over his shoulder. Before leaving, he bent down, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder.
I'm heading to teach now. Lock the door. Okay. Don't open for strangers. If anything happens, call me.
Anna nodded, flashed the sign for okay with one hand and a thumbs up with the other. Elias kissed her forehead.
I'll be back before 8. And hey, no drawing on the instruments. All right.
She covered her mouth with a silent giggle, then raised her hands like she was hiding a secret. Elias chuckled and shook his head as he walked out. Down the gravel path past the old townhouses, Elias pedaled his bike, carrying with him Anna's silent laughter and the fragile faith that music, though it couldn't quite pay all the bills, still kept them whole. And somewhere in the quiet shadows of Bellwood, music still rang out from the hearts of people who seemed small but were holding on to the most beautiful parts of the world. When Elias returned home, the clock was nearing 8 p.m. The lights inside the shop still glowed, casting a warm amber hue through the window like a mother's open palm holding the night at bay. A cold breeze slipped down his collar, making him shiver. But inside, his heart felt light. The lesson with Ben had gone better than expected. Despite his shyness, the boy showed remarkable talent. More importantly, his eyes lit up the moment he touched the guitar strings that Spark Elias always looked for in anyone drawn to music. He parked his bike by the porch, opened the door, and the wind chime gave a soft ring, not to welcome a customer, but to greet the man who called this place home. Anna was sitting by the window, the desk lamp turning her brown hair to gold. She looked up, and her eyes smiled before her lips did. In her hands was a small box, folded from cardboard, adorned with a bright red heart. Elias took off his coat, set his bag on the table.
What have you been up to?
Anna shrugged, then held the box out to him. Elias opened it, and inside was a handmade clay keychain shaped like a piano. It was lopsided and clumsy, painted with care. His throat tightened. A gift with no sound, but louder than 1,000 words he'd never heard from her. Anna signed, "For you." Elias nodded, speechless. He knelt down and pulled her into a hug. In his arms, she was small but strong, like a candle holding its flame against the winter dark. Though she couldn't speak, she had found her own ways to say, "I love you. I see you." After a light dinner, Elias brewed tea while Anna drank warm milk. They sat together on the couch, Anna resting her head on his shoulder, her eyes half closed. From the old radio in the corner, A gentle violin melody spilled into the room, weaving a soft blanket of sound over them both. Elias looked at his daughter, gently stroking her hair. He remembered those early days when he first learned she couldn't speak. There had been fear, helplessness, long nights sitting beside her crib, asking God why. But then Anna grew, and he understood she didn't need words to reach people's hearts. She only needed to be there, to smile, to sit silently at the piano and let the world hear what it had forgotten. She couldn't say "I love you," but every action, every drawing, every glance said it louder than any language ever could. Elias stood, pulled the blanket gently over Anna. She had fallen asleep, lips curved faintly, as if dreaming of a place filled with instruments and light.
He dimmed the room, leaving only the lamp casting a soft glow over the piano in the corner. Then he walked over, sat down, placed his hands on the keys, and he played not to practice, not to teach, but to give thanks.
The piece he played that night had no name. It was for Claire, for Anna, and for himself. A man who had lost so much but had managed to hold on to the one thing that mattered most, love, no matter the form it took. Outside, snow began to fall, and in the little music shop at the heart of Bellwood, a father played in silence, to preserve all that was beautiful for his mute daughter, who slept quietly, and would always remain wordless, yet still made the whole world listen. The next morning, a soft rain fell over Bellwood. Rain here was never loud, more like a quiet mist descending from the sky, trickling gently down old roof tiles and flowing silently along rusted gutters. The music shop, too, grew quieter than usual, fewer customers, fewer greetings. Only the wall clock marked time with soft, steady ticks. Elias sat behind the counter, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, eyes scanning the local newspaper. On the floor, Anna lay on the rug, hugging a stuffed cat and colouring made-up musical notes in her sketchbook. The doorbell jingled this time, not from a customer, but from the push of the mailman. A thin man in a rain-wet cap slipped a cream envelope into Elias's hand with a nod, then turned and left. Elias glanced at the envelope. No logo, just his name written in elegant, slanted script. He opened it. The paper was thick, the ink still fresh.
Dear Mr. Elias Brandt, I was referred to you as the most reliable instrument repairer in the region. I currently possess an early 20th century upright piano in serious disrepair due to many years of neglect. If possible, I would appreciate an assessment and your recommendation for restoration. I will cover all travel and service fees, regardless of the outcome. Sincerely, Lisa Whitmore, 167, Bellwood Estate Road.
Elias read the name again, Lisa Whitmore. He didn't recall ever hearing that name in town, but the address was familiar. Bellwood Estate, the old mansion district on the southern edge. Only a few families lived there now, wealthy, private, and rarely seen in the village centre. He folded the letter into his pocket and looked at Anna. She was already watching him, as if sensing something important had just arrived.
I'll have to step out this afternoon, kiddo.
Anna tilted her head, blinking, then quickly sketched a piano, a hammer, and a screwdriver on a scrap of paper.
That's right, a very old one.
She nodded, then signed, "Can I come?" Elias hesitated. It was a stranger's home. an elegant estate. Maybe not the right place for a little girl, especially one who made her own kind of noise in the quietest ways.
Let me check it out first. If it's all right, I'll bring you next time. Okay.
Anna nodded, though her eyes dimmed slightly. She never liked being apart from her father, even for an afternoon. Elias rested a hand on her shoulder.
I won't be long.
That afternoon, as the rain eased, Elias set out. Bellwood Estate wasn't far, but it felt like another world entirely. Stone walls lined the road. Tall maples bent like old gentlemen watching the years pass. And the house, no. The mansion appeared between the trees like a memory Edwardian style, grand and timeless. The iron gate stood open. Elias rolled his bike through, a strange feeling rising in his chest as though he were stepping into a place that wasn't quite his. A middle-aged housekeeper greeted him at the door and led him inside. The floor gleamed like water. Old paintings lined the walls. A hint of perfume lingered in the air. And then he saw the piano. It sat in a side room by a large window, ivory-grey paint, chipped and cracked, a few broken keys, loose strings, but the design was unmistakable. It was a 1910 Steinway & Sons upright, rare, priceless, and full of soul. Elias stepped forward and laid his hand gently on the lid. That's when he heard a voice behind him, soft, feminine, clear as autumn wind.
Can it be saved?
Elias turned, and for a moment his heart missed a beat. She stood there in a pale blue dress, chestnut hair falling lightly past her shoulders, no heavy makeup. But her eyes, those eyes made something inside him stir, like seeing a ghost from a dream.
Claire.
No, not Claire, but the resemblance, her features, her gaze. Her mouth was uncanny, not a passing similarity, but as if fate had chosen to replay an old song on a different piano. Elias composed himself, trying to keep his voice steady.
It'll take a lot of work, but yes, it can be saved. Though it won't be cheap.
I don't care about the cost. I just want to hear it play again, like it used to.
Elias nodded, but in his mind, a storm had already begun to brew. He didn't know if it was the piano or the eyes of the woman who stood before him.
Elias stood frozen for a few seconds, not because he didn't know what to do with the piano in front of him, but because his heart, once again, refused to follow reason. Lisa Whitmore. The name now had a face, and that face made Elias feel as though time itself had just pierced through his chest. She didn't look exactly like Claire, his late wife, but there was something in Lisa that unsettled him deeply, eyes as soft as spring water, lips poised to smile but somehow never fully doing so, and that posture graceful, quiet, like she didn't quite belong to this world. Elias steadied himself. He looked back at the piano. Taking a screwdriver in hand, he sat on the bench, lifted the lid, and began his assessment.
The bass frame's warped. A few strings need to be replaced completely. 3 keys are damaged. Those need full action work. And the hammers. I'll probably need to pull them all out and treat them separately.
Lisa said nothing. She stood a few steps behind him, hands folded in front of her, watching him work like one might watch an artist mid-performance.
I heard you don't fix instruments that feel soulless.
Elias glanced up, surprised.
Who told you that?
Mrs. Mary at the library. She said you only take on pianos you can feel something from.
Elias chuckled softly, shaking his head.
I might have said that once, probably after a drink or two, but maybe there's some truth in it.
Lisa stepped closer. placing her hand gently on the worn wood of the piano.
This used to be my grandmother's. She was the one who introduced me to music. After she passed, the piano was forgotten for years. I want to bring it back.
To remember her.
No, to remember myself.
Elias didn't reply, but the words echoed in his chest, to remember myself, like a lullaby from a memory too long buried.
The room held its breath for a few beats. Only the soft rain tapping at the window and the scribble of Elias's pencil in his repair notebook filled the space. He was listing every part that needed restoration.
But his mind wasn't fully on the piano anymore.
She looked too much like Claire, not just in features, but in presence. That same quiet gravity that made a man who had lost everything take a step back, afraid that stepping forward might mean never returning. Lisa moved around the piano, her eyes drifting over the walls, the shelves, and finally resting on a stool by the window.
If the piano needs to be moved to your shop, I can arrange transport. But if you prefer to work here, this room is yours.
Elias looked up, caught off guard by the offer.
Thank you. I'll think about it. Either way, the piano deserves to be brought back.
Lisa smiled, a smile soft and wistful, like a Chopin nocturne.
Just like some people do.
Elias froze, his eyes meeting hers, but Lisa offered no further explanation. She turned and walked slowly toward the door.
I'll leave you with it. If you need anything, just call for me.
The door clicked gently shut behind her. And Elias, now alone in the wide, quiet room, suddenly felt like he had stepped into a very old dream, a dream he had long forgotten, but that now lived again through a single look, a quiet smile, and a piano buried in time. That afternoon, Elias stayed in the room with the piano for nearly 3 hours. He checked each string, tapped every key, measured the frame's warping with precision tools, and marked every crack that needed mending. His hands moved like an archaeologist decoding ancient relics, while his mind drifted somewhere between present and past. He noticed something strange. This was the oldest piano he had ever worked on, yet even in its fractured, muted tones, it carried something close to longing. No one could truly explain why an instrument had a soul, but Elias had never doubted that truth. He set the hammer and screwdriver on the table, stood up, and looked toward the door. And almost as if summoned by a silent calling, Lisa appeared. She wore a beige sweater and held 2 steaming mugs of tea. Without invitation, without hesitation, she walked in like she had done it 100 times before.
I figured you could use something warm.
Elias took the cup. Their hands brushed barely, but it was enough to stop his heart for a moment.
Thank you. Mind if I sit?
Lisa nodded. They both settled onto a long bench near the window. The rain had stopped. The sky had turned a pale grey, casting a fog-like light across the tops of the trees. They sat there, each cradling their tea, gazing out at the garden.
How long have you lived in Bellwood?
Almost 8 years.
Why?
Elias didn't answer right away. He took a sip of tea, then looked directly at Lisa. She didn't look away.
My wife passed, right after giving birth to our daughter. I needed somewhere quiet to begin again.
Lisa nodded gently, not asking for more. She looked down at her tea. her hands clasped around it like she was holding something fragile, about to break.
I know that feeling. Loss. Sometimes it makes no sound, but it leaves a space that echoes forever.
Elias studied her, unable to hide his curiosity.
Who did you lose?
No one died, but sometimes people still disappear, even when they're alive. Fog.
Elias didn't press. He knew that kind of silence wasn't a gap to be filled. It was a pause to let the speaker breathe. They sat like that for a few more minutes, saying nothing, listening only to the sound of falling leaves, the breeze slipping through cracks in the window, and the quiet rhythm of their own hearts. Finally, Lisa spoke again.
Your daughter. How old is she?
8, born mute.
But she plays piano, right?
No one taught her. She just feels it, finds the melodies on her own.
Lisa smiled, and something flickered behind her eyes like a tiny fire catching light.
Then you live with an angel.
Elias nodded slightly. In his heart, Anna wasn't just a miracle, she was the only reason he hadn't fallen apart. Lisa rose and walked over to the piano. She laid a hand on the keys and pressed one. The sound was harsh, off-key. She laughed.
You've got your work cut out for you.
It's not magic, it's just listening more closely to what others have forgotten.
Lisa turned back, her eyes shining under the soft light.
Then tell me, can you hear me?
Elias didn't know how to answer. But deep down, he knew he had been listening from the very moment she stepped into the room, carrying with her a light he thought he had lost forever. Elias left the Whitmore estate as twilight settled over Bellwood. Thick clouds blanketed the sky, and the weak glow from the streetlights glimmered on rain-slick pavement, casting tired reflections mirroring his own weary heart. He pedaled slowly toward the village centre. Each turn of the wheels pulled him deeper into a maze of emotions he hadn't begun to understand. His heart felt heavy, not from the old piano waiting to be fixed, but from the look in the eyes of the woman he'd just left behind. Elias had believed his heart had closed itself off to feeling, that every skipped beat would only echo the ache of Claire's memory. But Lisa wasn't Claire. She didn't speak like her, didn't smile like her, and certainly didn't live like the woman he had once loved with all his soul.
And yet, why did his heart stir like that?
The music shop appeared in the distance, though, its golden window a small beacon in the sea of night. When he stopped his bike out front, the wind chime rang softly, and small footsteps rushed toward the door.
Anna?
She wrapped her arms around him, just like she always did when he came home. But tonight, she tugged on his sleeve and looked into his eyes, long and deep. Eyes like mirrors, reflecting all the things Elias hadn't dared say out loud. He placed a hand on her head, gently brushing her hair. Then he knelt to remove his shoes, wiped them dry, and stepped inside. Anna returned to her drawing spot, but didn't pick up her pencils. She was watching him. Elias hung his coat, walked into the kitchen, flipped on the kettle. He looked around, searching for something, anything to keep his hands busy. But there was nothing, just a silence filled with things unsaid, and a room full of notes yet to be played. Anna approached him, holding out a freshly drawn picture, a man standing beside a piano, next to a woman in a long dress with soft brown hair. In the man's hand, a small red heart. Elias looked at the drawing. His throat tightened.
Who's this?
Anna pointed to the woman in the picture, then added a piano beside her. Then she signed, simply, beautiful. Elias knelt beside her, eyes searching hers.
She's not your mother.
Anna nodded, but she still smiled.
No words, no argument. Sometimes children saw everything with just a brush of air. That night, Elias didn't play. He didn't read. He sat on the long couch, holding a lukewarm cup of tea, staring out into the night. The rain had stopped earlier, but the wind still blew. Branches tapped gently against the window glass.
Lisa. Her name circled his mind like a quiet chorus, unclear, yet persistent enough to keep him awake. And when the clock struck midnight, Elias was still awake. In his hand was Anna's drawing. In his heart, a feeling he couldn't quite name, part wonder, part fear, and part guilt, because he never thought he could feel something like that again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the music shop windows earlier than usual. The sky had shed its gloom, replaced by a pale blue stretched thin over golden maple leaves. But Elias hadn't gotten out of bed. He lay still, eyes open, staring at the age-stained wooden ceiling. Outside, Anna was already up, quietly putting away sheet music and tidying the scattered drawings from the night before. She moved with gentle care, as if not to disturb the thoughts swirling inside her father's mind. Elias emerged from his room after nearly half an hour of silence. He wore an old sweater and a slightly crooked scarf. At a glance, he looked the same, but Anna noticed right away his steps were slower, his eyes not as steady. While Elias fumbled with the coffee maker, Anna sat at the piano. Her fingers rested on the keys, but she didn't play. Instead, she looked at her father, then picked up her pencil and drew a heart cracked down the center. Elias placed his coffee cup on the table, then froze when he saw the paper.
When did you draw this?
Anna didn't answer. She just met his gaze, then signed heart not happy.
Elias sat down, searching her face as if trying to find the gentlest way to speak a truth that might break something fragile.
Yesterday, I met a woman. She asked me to restore a piano, and she looked a lot like your mother.
Anna tilted her head, blinking softly. Then she quickly drew another image, 3 people, a man, a woman with long hair, and a little girl in the middle, holding both their hands. Elias gave a quiet, weary smile, rubbing his forehead.
It's not that simple. Kiddo, she's not your mom, and I'm not sure I deserve another chance.
Anna stopped drawing. She walked over, gently took her father's hand, and placed it over his chest where his heart still beat steadily. No words, no pictures, just a silent gesture. But Elias understood she was telling him, if your heart still beats, then you still have the right to love again. He squeezed her hand and pulled her into a hug. Once again, Anna had done what the entire world could not, spoken everything without saying a word. That was the quiet magic Elias always believed only Anna could create.
The rest of the day, Elias repaired 2 violins and a ukulele with a broken neck, but his mind never strayed far from Whitmore Estate. From Lisa, from the way she spoke, the music hidden in her eyes, like a love song not yet finished.
In the afternoon, while Anna played at the piano, Elias walked over and sat beside her. He didn't say a word, just watched her tiny fingers dance over the keys. Then he placed his hands on the piano too, and they played together, a gentle duet. wordless, deeply understood, a melody only they could create. When the song ended, Elias turned to Anna.
Do you think your mom would be happy if I started living again?
Anna nodded, no hesitation.
She signed, "Mum is gone, but I'm still here." Elias held her hand tight, feeling as though he had just been pulled back from a cliff he never dared to name.
Love, he realized, wasn't a betrayal of the past. It was a gift for those still here.
That day, the sky was clear and the wind gentle. The music shop opened early, just like always. Elias was adjusting the strings on a 1967 Fender Telecaster, while Anna, as usual, sat quietly by the window, her eyes drifting toward the cobblestone street outside. But something felt different. Not in the guitar, not in the light. It was in the air itself, like the silence before a familiar song begins again, but in a new key. At exactly 9:43 a.m., the wind chime rang, the door opened, and a middle-aged man stepped inside. He wore a charcoal wool coat. His face was square, deeply lined, like time had carved every wrinkle. Salt and pepper hair neatly combed, polished shoes, and the edge of a classic wristwatch peeking from beneath his sleeve. Elias set the guitar down, wiped his hands on a cloth, and stepped forward.
Good morning. Can I help you?
The man glanced around, not with the rushed look of someone browsing, but with the quiet, deliberate gaze of someone listening to stories told by every piece of wood and string in the room.
This is a very special place.
His voice was low, clear, with the presence of someone used to being listened to. A lawyer, perhaps, a politician, or someone who once stood a little above the crowd in a town like Bellwood.
Thank you. I try to keep the original spirit of the shop. What brings you in today?
The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked slowly toward the corner of the shop, to the old upright Yamaha, Claire's piano. Elias stiffened slightly, but even the air seemed to pause.
This is a 1981 Yamaha upright, isn't it?
It is, but it's not for sale.
The man turned to him, not surprised.
I figured, but I still had to ask. Some things can't be bought, but they deserve, at least once, to be valued.
It's a keepsake. My wife used to play it every day. I keep it for my daughter.
The man looked at Anna. She was watching them both, her eyes clear, focused, and strangely knowing. She wasn't afraid. She simply understood.
I mean no disrespect, but I'd like to make an offer.
Elias's hands tightened. He walked slowly toward the piano, placing himself between it and the stranger like a guardian.
You can name any number you want, but I won't sell it.
The man didn't react with offense. Instead, he nodded, calm and composed, like someone who had expected the answer.
Then at least let me leave my card. If the day ever comes when circumstances change, or if you'd simply like to know why I want this piano, call me.
He extended a cream-colored business card, embossed with gold lettering. Richard Whitmore, Whitmore Holdings.
Elias froze. Whitmore, that name wasn't unfamiliar. Couldn't be.
As Richard stepped out, Elias stared at the card. His eyes narrowed, as if he were reading not just a name, but a history behind it. Anna came up beside him, signing with her hands. Who was that?
A stranger, but maybe not entirely.
He set the card on the table and sank into a chair, head resting on one hand. The feeling in his chest was unsteady. A man had come in not to shop, not to haggle, but to ask for the one thing Elias had sworn never to part with. And that man shared a name with Lisa.
Elias flipped the card over. On the back, a handwritten message: I once promised someone I'd buy this piano for her back when I couldn't afford to.
Elias read the line over and over. A promise. An unfinished dream. And something about it made his chest tighten.
All afternoon, Elias couldn't focus. His hands worked tightening screws, adjusting strings, but his thoughts wandered, lost in a melody he hadn't written and memories that weren't his.
That evening, Anna brought him her sketchbook. She held out a new drawing, her mother's piano, and a man in a hat standing beside it, holding a flower. Elias chuckled softly.
You see everything, huh?
Anna nodded, signing, he wants the piano, but it's Mum's.
Elias gently squeezed her shoulder.
That's right, and I never planned to change that.
But even as he said the words, something uncertain crept into his heart. Not greed, not sentiment, but the weight of a promise made long ago by someone else, during a time of hardship.
And Elias couldn't help but wonder if it wasn't about money or desire, but about keeping a promise.
Then maybe, just maybe, the man deserved to hear that piano one more time. Elias didn't have the answer. All he knew was that night, as he played lullabies to help Anna sleep, the notes came slower, heavier, different, like someone else's past was quietly finding its way into the room, meant only for him and his daughter. 2 days had passed since the encounter with Richard Whitmore, and Elias still hadn't called. The business card remained tucked away in a drawer, nestled among old receipts and sun-faded photographs, but it never left his thoughts. Elias had always believed some things could never be priced. Claire's piano was one of them. It wasn't just an instrument. It was a goodbye he never got to say, a promise to his daughter that her mother's music would always live between them.
But life, as he'd learned, was rarely as simple as a melody, and sometimes unfamiliar notes opened the rest of a song you'd never known you were part of. That Friday morning, while Elias was dusting off a student's violin, the shop door opened. It wasn't a new customer, it was Lisa.
She wore a long caramel coat and a hand-woven scarf. The light from the window caught in her hair like a faint halo. But today, her eyes didn't carry the usual warmth. Elias looked up, caught off guard.
Lisa.
Can we talk? Just for a few minutes?
Elias glanced around the shop, then nodded. Anna sat nearby, quietly watching them, though she didn't approach. She could sense the shift in the room's rhythm. They stepped into the back, where Elias kept a small tea table. Lisa sat, removed her gloves, and placed them gently on the table. Her gaze met his direct, without pretense.
My father came here, didn't he?
Elias hesitated. The question was simple, but behind it, a storm.
He asked to buy Claire's piano.
And you said no.
I did.
I know it must sound strange. I didn't think he'd actually come. He's someone who lives in memories, but rarely acts on them.
He left a card and a note saying he once promised someone he'd buy that piano.
Lisa nodded, her eyes drifting to somewhere far beyond the room.
My mother, she passed when I was young. Back then, we had very little. My mum worked at a small cafe with a piano, and she used to tell my father that if they ever had money, she'd buy one just like it for the two of us. But he couldn't, and she died before it ever happened.
Elias sat in silence. Emotions twisted inside him. Confusion, understanding, and something painful he hadn't expected. That story, though different, mirrored something he had lived with Claire.
I didn't know.
No one blames you. You've kept that piano for a beautiful reason. But my father, he's not trying to buy it with money. He's trying to pay off a guilt that's never left him.
Elias leaned back in his chair, staring up at the aged wooden ceiling where a few framed panels hung slightly askew with time.
I'm not sure I'm ready to lose anything more.
Lisa's voice softened.
Sometimes, to keep something, we have to let go of something else. Not to forget, but to let others move forward too.
Her words drifted into the air gently without pressure, but they landed in Elias's heart like a final note at the end of a symphony, small, deep, and silent enough to steal all sound. Lisa stood.
I didn't come to convince you, only to tell you the story on the other side of that piano.
Elias nodded, unsure what to say. Lisa offered a small smile and rested her hand lightly on the table.
Thank you for listening.
And then she left, quietly, just as she had come. Elias remained seated, in a place he thought he understood completely. But now, everything felt like a song that had just changed key, not easy to follow, not easy to forget, but worth listening to all over again. 3 weeks had passed since Elias's conversation with Lisa, and he still hadn't called Richard Whitmore. Claire's piano remained in its usual corner, covered now by a fine film of dust like spider silk, like the silence of something waiting for its owner to finally decide.
But time doesn't wait.
Rent had gone up by 15%. Winter utilities were higher than usual. Several students had cancelled their music lessons, parents losing jobs, families moving away, and Elias's bicycle, his only transport to teaching gigs, had a busted rear wheel. That morning, Elias opened the kitchen cabinet to find just 2 packets of instant noodles and a half-empty bag of dried fruit. Over his shoulder, he saw Anna at the table, drawing a piano with musical notes flying off like birds. He said nothing. He cooked the noodles, gave Anna the bigger portion, and drank only coffee himself.
Anna looked at him, then lowered her head. She couldn't speak, but her eyes were the truest language. She knew things were hard. She knew the house didn't feel as safe or full as it used to, and she knew there was nothing she could do except smile, so her father wouldn't fall apart.
That afternoon, Elias made a house call for a long-time client. When he returned, there was a letter waiting from Anna's school for the hearing-impaired. Tuition for the next semester was due earlier than expected. If unpaid, Anna would be placed on hold. Elias sat in the corner of the shop, hands covering his face, the letter crumpled in his fist. Outside, the skies of Bellwood wept harder than usual. The rain came heavy like the world had joined the weight pressing down on him.
That night, after Anna had fallen asleep, Elias sat alone in the dark. No piano, no tea, just the old business card on the table in front of him, and one relentless question echoing in his chest. Can you hold on to memory if it makes the present unlivable?
He thought of Claire, her laugh, loud and unashamed, every time she played a wrong note. Her eyes, the first time she saw that piano at the auction, lit up like she'd found a missing piece of her soul. But Claire had also been the one to teach him that music doesn't survive in the past. A melody only matters if it can still be heard today. And Elias's present was an 8-year-old girl eating dried fruit for 3 days straight, bills stacked like novels, and a promise he wasn't sure he could afford to keep. He picked up the phone, his hand trembled.
And finally, he dialed the number printed on that old business card. 1 ring, then 2, then a familiar voice answered.
Elias Brandt.
Yes, it's Elias.
My offer still stands.
Elias paused. Every word he spoke next felt like a cut.
The piano. If you still want it, I'll agree.
Silence on the other end. Then Richard responded, without a hint of victory or smugness.
I'll send someone to collect it, and I'd like to see the girl Anna.
Elias froze.
Why?
Because if I'm buying someone's memory, I want to know what it's truly worth.
Elias didn't know if he felt sorrow or gratitude, but he nodded.
Tomorrow morning.
After the call, Elias set the phone down. He turned to the piano. He didn't cry. He just sat there, then leaned forward and kissed the lid like a farewell to the woman he had loved, and to the years that had once been everything. That night, he didn't sleep. That morning, Bellwood was colder than usual. The first sunlight pierced through a thin veil of mist, casting pale white beams across the stone-paved streets. Elias had been up for hours, but he didn't turn on the lights, didn't play music, didn't make coffee like he usually did. He just sat beside the piano, fingers gently brushing the aged wood. The instrument, almost sentient in its silence, gave no sound, not even the faintest echo. It, too, seemed to feel the coming goodbye, the hey.
Anna woke up, hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. She saw her father by the piano and though she didn't yet know what was happening, she felt it. Something was different.
Elias looked over at her. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
Come here, sweetheart.
Anna walked slowly, climbing onto the bench beside him. Elias wrapped her in his arms. His hands trembled.
Today, we have to say goodbye to the piano.
Anna looked up, confused. She glanced at the piano, then back at her father. Then she signed, "Why?" Elias took a deep breath. His eyes were red.
Because I can't keep it anymore. We need money for your school and for food. I've tried, but I can't watch you eat dry rations for another week.
Anna looked at the piano again, then lowered her head. She didn't cry. She didn't draw. She just sat there, holding the edge of her dress tight.
Elias held her closer.
I'm sorry. If your mom were here, I think she'd make the same choice.
Anna nodded slowly. Then she stood, went to her room, and returned with a drawing. It was of the piano, more detailed and colourful than ever before. Below it, in large hand-drawn signs, was written goodbye, Mum.
Elias couldn't hold it back anymore. He bent forward, shoulders shaking. For the first time in years, he let himself fall apart, his grief rising like a symphony's crescendo, impossible to stop, impossible. The sound of a car pulling up snapped him back. He stood, wiped his face, and took a deep breath. He motioned for Anna to get her coat, and together they stepped outside. A sleek black SUV idled by the curb. The driver, in a suit, stepped out and gave a polite nod.
I'm from the Whitmore estate. The car is ready.
Elias nodded. He opened the shop door. Inside, the piano sat quietly, like an aging witness. He and the driver moved it carefully, gently, as if escorting a family member on their final journey. Just before the SUV doors closed, Elias knelt, placed his hand on the piano's lid, and whispered.
Thank you for everything.
Anna stepped forward without a word. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small handkerchief. She tucked it under the piano's lid before it closed.
Elias looked at her.
What's that?
Anna signed for Mum to take with her. Elias nodded. Together, they watched the car drive away, taking with it a piece of both their hearts. That afternoon, the music shop stayed closed. Elias and Anna sat on the living room floor, eating bread and cheese, sipping warm milk. After days of dried food, it felt like a small feast. Elias watched his daughter eat, her cheeks full, her eyes bright. There was no piano anymore, but Anna still smiled. She still played. She still lived. Maybe he had made the right choice. A week later, winter arrived, early in Bellwood. Snow began to dust the rooftops, tiny white flakes clinging to window panes, melting into cold water trails. Elias wore his old knit cap and gloves, pushing the now empty handcart through quiet, frozen streets. The cart, once used to deliver instruments, carried nothing today. But Elias pushed it anyway, maybe out of habit, maybe to convince himself that things were still moving forward. When he reached the gates of the Whitmore estate, they were already open. A servant greeted him silently and led him in, as if everything had been arranged for a ceremony. In the grand hall, Claire's piano, no longer his, sat in a place of honor. Under the soft golden light, it looked heartbreakingly beautiful. No dust, no scratches. The wood gleamed. The keys shone like they'd never known sorrow. Elias stood a few steps away. He didn't approach. He wasn't sure he had the strength to touch it one last time. From the staircase above, Lisa descended. She wore a simple white dress, her coat folded over her arm. No elaborate makeup, but her presence calm, pure, left Elias breathless.
My father would like to speak with you. He's waiting in the music room.
Elias nodded. He followed her down the long hallway, portraits of old ancestors watching as they passed. The silence was so complete. Elias could hear his own footsteps. In the music room, Richard Whitmore stood beside the piano. Dressed in a tailored suit, collar sharp, he held a steaming cup of tea. When he saw Elias, he smiled.
Thank you for coming.
Elias didn't respond. He simply nodded.
I've read about your daughter. She's extraordinary.
I know.
And I understand. You've sacrificed a lot, not just for her, but for memory itself.
Elias met his eyes.
Memories aren't for sale, but if they can feed my child, give her a future, then I'll let them go.
Richard stepped to the piano, opened the lid, and placed his fingers on the keys. A single note rang out, thin, high, and as beautiful as frost at dawn.
Lisa's mother once sat at a piano just like this. She always said if we had the means, she wanted one for our daughter, but I couldn't give it to her. She passed before I ever had the chance. I didn't buy this to keep a promise. I bought it to apologize.
Elias didn't answer. He didn't know what to say to a man trying to mend his past by saving someone else's memory.
When they stepped out, Lisa was waiting in the hallway, Anna by her side. The girl held her hand.
Anna ran to her father, hugging him tightly. Then, unexpectedly, she turned back to Lisa, grabbed her hand, and pulled her gently toward Elias, placing Lisa's hand in his. Lisa froze. Elias went still. Richard looked on, smiling quietly, as if he'd witnessed something greater than any deal.
Can she be my mum?
Elias's face went pale. He crouched and held her close, voice trembling.
Don't do that, sweetheart.
But Lisa didn't let go. She smiled, softly squeezing Elias's hand. No promises, no words, just presence warm, real, and deeply understanding. On the way home, Elias and Anna sat together in the Whitmore car. Snow thickened outside, white veils blurring the world beyond the windows. Anna turned to him, signing, "Do you like Miss Lisa?" Elias stared out for a long time before answering.
I only love your mother, and she will always be the only one.
Anna didn't respond. She just held his hand and leaned her head against his shoulder. That night, for the first time in nearly a month, their dinner table was full: roast chicken, pumpkin soup, toasted bread, warm milk. Elias had cooked every bit of it himself. Father and daughter ate together, no music, no TV, just the clinking of silverware and two hearts still beating in a small kitchen, warm and still hopeful. A week had passed since the farewell to the piano, but Elias's music shop still opened its doors each morning, though the ache of absence still lingered. Anna's gentle brightness, her quiet wisdom, and the new light seeping into every corner of the shop helped Elias keep moving. The money from the piano sale had covered Anna's school tuition, repaired their leaking roof, and restocked the store with several new instruments, but more than that, it had given Elias something he thought he'd lost the chance to breathe fully without fear pressing on his chest. On Tuesday morning, as Elias wiped down a fresh set of guitar strings, the shop bell rang. A man stepped in, early 30s, in a black wool coat, polished leather shoes, a clean-shaven face, and a kind, easy smile.
Good morning. I heard this is the last shop in the region that still holds on to the old soul of music.
Elias nodded.
We try to keep what's worth keeping.
The man's eyes moved slowly around the shop, deliberate, thoughtful. He passed the guitar wall, paused at the ukuleles, then stopped completely at the violins and sound equipment.
I'm an event organizer. We're opening a new music center on the outskirts of the city. I was told you're not just a seller, but someone who actually lives with these instruments.
I'm not sure I've earned that reputation. But yes, I do love what I do.
Then I'm in the right place.
He pulled out a short list, not long, but the items were premium: a digital piano, mid-range violins, classical guitars, and a few rare audio accessories.
I want to buy all of this. If you have it in stock, I'll pay today. If not, quote me a price and place the order.
Elias blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly.
You mean all of it's here? Today?
All of it. And if your service matches your soul, I'll be back. This place, it has a sound the city forgot.
Anna stepped out from the back, holding a half-finished drawing, her eyes wide with curiosity. She approached her father slowly. Elias placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, as if to remind her and himself that good things should be met with humility.
I'll need about 30 minutes to check inventory and draft an estimate.
I've got time, and I trust someone who held on to a piano until he couldn't anymore.
Elias looked at him, a strange feeling rising. This wasn't just a sale, but he didn't ask questions. He simply nodded, thanked him, and walked into the back room. heart lighter than it had been in weeks. By noon, the deal was done. The man paid in full, left a business card, but didn't ask Elias to call. As he reached the door, he paused, watching Anna play a soft tune on a worn-out melodica.
That little girl makes you want to hear music again for the very first time.
Elias simply nodded, saying nothing. The door closed behind the man, and the wind chime rang this time, not as a goodbye, but as the overture to something new. And Anna, who couldn't speak, drew the man in her notebook a figure in a black coat, standing beneath falling snow, with a case hidden behind his back. Snow came early to Bellwood that year. The season's first flakes drifted down like chalk dust, blanketing rooftops and cobblestone streets in a quiet white veil. Inside the music shop, Elias was restringing an acoustic guitar when Anna came running from the back, waving excitedly, her eyes sparkling like she'd seen something rare. Elias looked up, glanced through the window, fogged with breath, and froze. Outside stood Lisa. She wore a long cream-colored coat and carried an old violin case in her arms. Her hair fell softly around her face, a few strands kissed by snow. Her lips were red from the cold, and her eyes, those same eyes, still carried that strange, quiet blend of memory and the present moment, folded together like music waiting to be played. Elias walked over and opened the door. The cold rushed in with her, carrying the familiar scent of Earl Grey and aged wood.
Lisa.
Hi, I hope I'm not intruding.
No, of course not. Please come in.
Lisa stepped inside, unwrapped her scarf, and opened the case. Inside was an old violin, its varnish chipped, strings loose, and small cracks webbed around the soundboard.
I found it in storage. It's the first violin I ever played when I was 12. I wasn't planning to keep it. But then I thought, if anyone could bring it back to life, it'd be you.
Elias knelt to examine the instrument, fingertips grazing the worn wood like touching a fragile soul.
It's not bad, just needs some care. The wood's still solid. No warping.
I can wait. There's no rush. I just wanted to stay a while, if that's okay.
Elias nodded, his heart skipped. Anna came closer, eyeing the violin, then Lisa. She didn't speak, just sat nearby, chin in her hands, her gaze shimmering like an autumn lake. Elias began working, removing strings, checking pegs, gently brushing off old dust. Lisa sat nearby, watching his every move.
Do you always work like this, so tender? Like you're putting something to sleep?
With instruments, always. They don't just make sound, they remember. Every scratch, every crack. It's a story.
Lisa smiled. She glanced at Anna, then back at Elias.
She seems happy I'm here.
She usually doesn't warm up to strangers. But with you, it's different.
Lisa looked down, hiding whatever had flickered in her eyes.
I never thought I'd step back into a music shop. But when I saw this violin, I knew I had to bring it here. Not to fix it. To hear it again.
Elias paused. He looked up, and their eyes met across a space filled with instruments and the quiet rhythm of two hearts slowly sinking.
Silence.
But the kind of silence that halts every melody, waiting for a new prelude to begin. Anna stood suddenly, walked over to Lisa, and held out a freshly drawn page. 3 figures, Elias, Lisa, and Anna sitting around a piano. Warm light pouring from above. Lisa looked at the picture, then at Elias.
She really drew me.
Elias nodded.
She only draws the ones she feels connected to.
Lisa said nothing more. She reached out and gently stroked Anna's head, then took her tiny hand like making a promise without saying a word. As she was leaving, Lisa turned back.
If you're free this weekend, there's an outdoor concert in the square. I have tickets. If you and Anna would like to come.
Elias hesitated but then nodded.
We'll be there.
The door closed behind her, leaving behind the faint scent of tea and the soft echo of a heart skipping for the second time in a lifetime. On Saturday afternoon, snow fell like mist, soft and steady, blanketing rooftops and tree-lined paths in white. The music shop had no customers. Elias hadn't hung a closed sign, but the lights were dimmed to a warm glow, just enough to hold the intimacy of a quiet winter day. Lisa arrived on time, carrying a wax-wrapped apple pie and a thermos of cinnamon tea. She wore a charcoal grey sweater, a light scarf, her hair tied up simply, no makeup. Yet she carried herself like firelight on a cold night, subtle, calm, and comforting. Elias greeted her with a shy but honest smile.
The smell reminds me of Christmas.
Nutmeg, cinnamon, and memories. It's my grandmother's recipe.
Anna ran from the back, clutching a sketch pad. She didn't speak, just took Lisa's hand and led her to the piano. She sat on the floor, spreading her drawings between the three of them little portraits. Lisa smiling, Elias fixing an instrument, a snow-covered window, and a quiet night lit by oil lamp. Lisa looked at each drawing carefully, smiling without hiding the emotion in her eyes.
She has her mother's eyes, doesn't she?
Elias paused. He rarely spoke of Claire, but this time he didn't turn away.
Claire used to draw like this, but not like Anna. Claire drew the future. Anna, she captures the present.
The three of them sat around the wooden table, sharing apple pie and tea. No one talked much, just enough silence for the music in the room to breathe through the grain of the floorboards, the rustle of paper, and the soft wind whispering outside. After they finished, Elias brought out the violin Lisa had left. It was fully restored polished wood. New strings, realigned bridge. Lisa picked it up, her hands trembling as she drew the bow across the strings for the first time in years. A note rang out, clear, delicate, like a ribbon of light cutting through the shop's gentle haze. Elias closed his eyes. Anna sat still, hands cradling her cheeks, eyes glowing. Lisa played a classical piece, Massenet's Meditation, the violin, her breath, her presence, and this space. It was as if they'd been waiting all along for this one moment to come together. When the piece ended, no one clapped, but everything had already been said in silence. Lisa set the violin down, breathing out softly.
It's been so long. I thought I'd forgotten how that felt.
You didn't forget. You were just waiting for a reason to remember.
Anna stood, walked to Lisa, and pulled one last drawing from her pad, a woman playing violin with a little girl beside her, chin resting in her hands. Lisa looked at Anna, then pulled her into a gentle hug. Elias watched, his heart skipping a beat. In that quiet moment, he realized sometimes love doesn't arrive with thunder or sparks. Sometimes it comes gently through afternoons like this, quiet, warm, and full of meaning. As she was leaving, Lisa turned back.
Do you remember the concert invitation?
I remember.
Then I'll wait for you both. By the fountain. 8 o'clock. I'll be wearing white.
She smiled and stepped out, each footfall leaving behind a soft echo of music on the shop's old wooden floor. Elias stood still, watching her go. And inside him, an old melody returned, not one of loss this time, but of hope. The next morning, snow blanketed Bellwood in silence. The entire town looked as if it had been tucked under a soft white quilt. The music shop opened like always, but no customers came. Elias spent the entire morning polishing keys, dusting shelves, as if preparing for something far different from a regular day. Anna sat by the window, sketchpad on her lap, but her hands didn't draw anything new. Instead, she stared out into the snowfall, watching flakes fall like unwritten letters drifting gently through the air. Elias walked over and sat beside her. From his pocket, he pulled out 2 stiff paper tickets, embossed with the title of a famous musical, Winter's Voice.
Anna's eyes lit up. She signed, "Who invited us?"
Lisa, she wants us to go with her tonight.
Anna smiled, then signed, "You have to dress up." Elias chuckled softly.
Then you'll need a pretty dress too.
That afternoon, Elias found an old suit tucked deep in the closet. White shirt, grey tie, long wool coat a little faded with time. He stared at his reflection, wondering when he last dressed like this. Maybe his wedding.
Anna wore a light blue dress, hair tied in twin ponytails, tiny boots laced up just right. She spun in front of her father, flashing 2 fingers like she was asking, "Pretty."
The most beautiful princess in Bellwood.
They stepped out into the evening as dusk settled in. Snow continued to fall, but the street lamps had already turned on, casting golden warmth across the cold, white streets. Father and daughter walked hand in hand like a slow waltz through everyday life. When they reached the fountain, Lisa was already there. She wore a floor-length white dress, high-necked and long-sleeved, with a soft grey shearling coat. Snow dusted her shoulders like even nature didn't dare disturb the purity she carried. Elias paused. Lisa turned. Their eyes met. Then Anna ran up, took Lisa's hand, and led her to Elias. She placed Lisa's hand in her father's and smiled. Not a word. But the entire world seemed to pause for that one moment. Lisa didn't pull away. She gently squeezed Elias's hand, then bent down and kissed Anna's forehead.
Thank you, little angel.
Elias didn't know what to say, but his eyes said it all, that his heart had opened again. Not for someone who reminded him of the past, but for someone brave enough to walk in without needing it. They stepped into the theatre, soft lighting, opening notes of music, velvet curtains fluttering slightly in the draught. The 3 of them sat in the center row, Anna between them, her small hands holding theirs, no sound, no words, just the kind of silence that makes an entire room lean in to listen.
As the overture began, Elias glanced at Lisa. Her eyes were closed, lips moving silently with the melody. And for the first time in years, Elias felt his heart stir not from loss, but from life.
But not because she reminded him of Claire, but because she made the music inside him breathe again. That night, after the musical ended, the 3 of them didn't rush home. They walked slowly along the empty main street, their footsteps echoing gently on snow-padded stone. Street lamps cast a golden glow across the glittering white. reflecting three silhouettes, one man, one woman, and a little girl walking between them. Anna held both their hands, her feet tapping lightly in rhythm with the melody still playing in her head. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone made the cold world feel warmer. Back at the shop, Elias unlocked the door and let Anna in first. She climbed onto the bench, pulled a blanket over herself, and yawned quietly. Elias knelt to take off her boots, then kissed her forehead. Lisa remained at the doorway, not stepping inside. The warm shop light painted a soft halo around her.
Stay a while.
Lisa shook her head, smiling gently like spring air on a winter breeze.
If I come in, I'm afraid I won't want to leave.
Elias didn't reply. He stepped closer, stopping just a breath away. Between them stood the threshold of the shop, and the threshold of something deeper, longing, hesitation, and the slow rhythm of something beginning again.
Thank you for tonight.
I should be the one saying that. I never thought a snowy evening could feel this warm.
Elias nodded slowly. Then his voice dropped low.
Lisa,
But he didn't finish, not because he lacked courage, but because something inside was still holding on too tightly.
You don't have to say it. Some things are meant to be played in music, not spoken in words.
Elias looked down. Lisa stepped closer, placed a hand gently on his shoulder.
When you're ready, I'll still be here.
She turned and walked away. Not quickly, not looking back. And Elias stood there, filled with 100 unsaid notes, 100 unplayed songs, all wrapped in one truth his heart was beginning to feel again, and that terrified him.
That night, Elias didn't sleep.
He sat by the piano, brushing his fingers across the keys, never playing a full piece, just touching fragments, as if trying to voice the feelings he still didn't dare name. In the middle of the night, Anna padded out from her room, blanket around her shoulders, eyes heavy with sleep. She said nothing, just sat beside him. Then she signed Anna. "Can she be my mum?" Elias looked away, hiding the emotion in his eyes.
we don't belong in their world.
Anna didn't react. She simply placed her hand over his, trembling on the keys, and leaned her head on his shoulder.
And in the winter night of Bellwood, as snow whispered outside, Elias understood the real fear wasn't in loving again, it was in believing he might not deserve to. Friday night, Bellwood looked like it had stepped straight out of a Christmas postcard. Snow had fallen gently all day, blanketing rooftops, windowsills, and every front step. The entire town glowed under golden and red lights, twinkling strands, pine wreaths, and cinnamon-scented candles lining the square. In the heart of town, an outdoor stage had been set up days prior. A crescent-shaped awning arched above, and long benches were draped in white wool throws. The wind was sharp, but no one complained. Tonight was the winter musical, the event the townspeople had looked forward to all season. Elias and Anna arrived early. She wore a red velvet coat, a white scarf, her eyes bright beneath a knit hat. Elias, in a grey suit with a long coat and leather gloves, looked put together, but his eyes held a flicker of hesitation. They sat in the second row, surrounded by a quiet yet eager crowd. On stage, the orchestra tuned their instruments, the violin hummed, warm enough to melt the chill in the air.
The lights dimmed, then rose again. The opening notes rang out, but Elias didn't look at the stage. He was scanning the crowd. And then he saw her.
Lisa stood behind the fountain, where lights from both sides cast a silken glow across her white dress. No heavy makeup, no jewelry, just Lisa simple. And yet her presence made Elias's heart skip. Anna noticed where her father's gaze had gone. She reached for his hand, tugged him to his feet.
Sweetheart, the show's starting.
Anna didn't answer. She gently pulled Lisa forward, then placed her hand into Elias's. A gesture as natural as anything she did, but one that carried the weight of a three-movement symphony ending on a silent note. Lisa didn't pull away. She met Elias's eyes, hers quiet and deep like a thawing March lake.
I thought if you came tonight, it'd be for Anna, but I hoped just a little that it might be for me too.
Elias didn't answer right away. He looked down at their joined hands, then back up.
It's for both of you, and for me too.
Anna smiled. She couldn't make sound, but her joy was so radiant. People passing by slowed down to witness it. In her hand was a small stone. She had etched into it, with a metal stylus, the day Dad first held Mum's hand.
Elias read it. His heart swelled until it ached. He looked up and saw Lisa had read it too. And there, beneath the soft golden lights, under silent falling snow, they kissed, gently. Truthfully, Bill, as if that kiss was the only music three hearts could ever share. On the snowy ground, Anna knelt and carved the date into the stone. No one had to teach her. She just watched and loved. And she did both better than any melody ever written.
That night, the three of them wandered the square, eating warm apple pastries, sipping cocoa, listening to Christmas carols played on violins and brass horns. Lisa's arm looped through Elias's. Anna walked between them, holding both their hands. And at a small intersection, beneath lanterns hung high, their shadows stretched across the snow. A family. Not perfect, not grand, but whole. The next morning, snow still blanketed the town, but it wasn't the silent, somber kind. This was holiday snow, bright, clean, full of promise. Elias woke early, not for work, but for something new, a day without plans, without routines. Just three people and all the time in the world to live, to laugh, to fill the spaces that once felt empty. Lisa arrived at the music shop on time, carrying a basket of warm pastries and hot chocolate in a thermos. Anna ran to meet her at the door, boots crunching in the snow, cheeks flushed red from the cold. She grabbed Lisa's hand and signed with wide, excited gestures. "You're spending the whole day with me, babe." Right. They had a simple breakfast in the shop, surrounded by the soft creak of wood and the scent of cinnamon. Elias brought out a little ukulele, strumming a few playful bars while Lisa tapped the rhythm on the table, and Anna clapped along, no words, no singing needed. Just sound, just presence. After breakfast, they strolled through the village. Bellwood was wrapped in holiday spirit. Children threw snowballs, adults strung lights. The cafe speakers played Christmas songs, and the scent of gingerbread floated through every alley. Lisa, in her long wool coat, held Anna's hand and told stories of the places she'd been: Paris, Florence, New York. She spoke softly, slowly. And Elias listened like she was playing a long sonata in spoken word. They wandered into an old toy shop where Anna picked out a tiny, tarnished brass harmonica. Elias bought it for her, and she immediately blew a few notes off-key but delightful, making everyone in the shop laugh. At noon they sat in the square park, eating sandwiches from a street cart, sipping cocoa, sharing tales of winters past. Lisa spoke of the first time she learned violin. Elias told a story about teaching a boy who only wanted to play drums, but whose mum insisted on piano. Anna drew all afternoon everything they saw, everyone they met, every little thing. She sketched a Santa Claus with Lisa's hair, a bell-strung guitar, and a family of 3 standing under falling snow, hand in hand. As the day ended, they sat together on the bench in front of the shop, watching as the village lights blinked on all around them.
I can't remember the last time I had a day like this.
Me neither. Maybe. Before everything changed.
Things have changed, Elias. But not all change is loss.
Elias looked at her, his gaze softening. Then he turned to Anna, who was dozing off on his shoulder, her hood pulled down over most of her face.
She's never called anyone Mom, but today, she drew you beside her, in every picture.
Lisa didn't reply. She just reached out and held his hand. And in that moment, no words were needed, just the quiet knowledge that their hearts had found the same melody. The snow kept falling, and Bellwood, this quiet little village, became the stage for a love song without accompaniment, just 3 people living, loving, and rewriting what music has always known. Happiness lives in moments that don't need names. The next morning, snow still blanketed Bellwood, but it wasn't the somber, silent snow of yesterday. It was festive, bright, and full of promise. Northern Virginia Magazine. Elias woke early, not for work, but for something new a day, without plans, without schedules, just the 3 of them and hours to live, to laugh, to fill the spaces that once felt empty. Lisa arrived at the music shop right on time, carrying a basket of warm pastries and a thermos of hot chocolate. Anna ran to greet her at the door, her boots sinking into the snow, cheeks rosy from the cold. She pulled Lisa inside, signing excitedly, "Spend the whole day with me!" They shared a simple breakfast in the shop, surrounded by the creak of wood and the scent of cinnamon. Elias brought out a small ukulele, strumming a few chords as Lisa tapped rhythm on the table and Anna clapped along, no words. No need for lyrics, just sound and presence. After breakfast, they strolled through the village. Bellwood buzzed with holiday spirit. Children tossed snowballs, adults hung lights, cafes played Christmas music through outdoor speakers, and the aroma of gingerbread filled every corner. Lisa, in her long knit coat, held Anna's hand, sharing stories of places she'd been: Paris, Florence, New York. She spoke in a warm, measured tone, and Elias listened quietly, as if she were narrating a sonata in words. They stopped at a vintage toy store where Anna chose a small, tarnished brass harmonica. Elias bought it for her, and she immediately played a few notes, making everyone in the shop smile at her innocent joy. At noon, they sat in the town square park, eating sandwiches from a nearby cart, sipping cocoa, and sharing stories of past winters. Lisa recounted her first time playing the violin. Elias spoke of teaching a boy who only wanted to play drums but was made to learn piano by his mother. Anna sketched non-stop throughout the afternoon every place they visited, every person they met, every little detail. She drew a snowman with Lisa's hair, a bell-hung guitar, and a family of 3 standing hand in hand in the snowy night. As the day ended, they sat together on the bench outside the shop, watching the village lights come on.
I can't remember the last time I had a day like this.
Me neither. Maybe before everything changed.
Things have changed. Elias. But not all change is loss.
Elias looked at her, his eyes softening. Then he turned to Anna, dozing on his shoulder, her hood covering most of her face.
She's never called anyone Mom, but today she drew you beside her in every picture.
Lisa said nothing. She simply took his hand. And in that moment, no words were needed. Their hearts had found a shared melody. Snow continued to fall. And Bellwood, this little village, became the stage for a love song without accompaniment, just 3 people living, loving, and rewriting what music had never forgotten. Happiness is found in moments that need no name. That night, the music shop was quieter than usual. Anna had gone to bed early, clutching her new harmonica like a tiny treasure. The living room, warmed by the fireplace, carried the faint scent of cinnamon and orange blossom tea. Elias sat on the couch, holding a small black velvet box. Inside was a simple silver ring, not an engagement ring sparkling with diamonds, but a plain band that once belonged to Claire, now kept as something sacred. He stared at it for a long time, his heart tangled like an unsung symphony. His hand trembled slightly as he set the box on the table. Lisa sat across from him, holding a cup of tea, watching Elias with eyes full of patience and understanding.
Were you about to say something?
Elias smiled faintly, unable to hide the uncertainty in his gaze.
I once had everything a man could dream of: a loving wife, a daughter, a little music shop. Then I lost almost all of it. Only Anna remained, and melodies no one heard to the end.
But now you're not alone.
Elias looked at her, gratitude shining in his eyes.
Lisa, I never thought I could love someone again. Not because of Claire, but because I didn't believe my heart was whole enough to truly love. Until you walked into the shop carrying that violin.
Lisa said nothing. She set her tea down, eyes fixed on Elias. Elias lowered his head, opened the ring box.
This isn't a proposal. Not today. Not now. But if someday you feel that the 3 of us could be a family, I'd like to give you this ring.
Lisa sat still. Then she stood, walked slowly to him, took the box, and looked inside. She didn't cry. She simply smiled, placing her hand over his.
I think you're a step behind.
Elias looked puzzled.
Lisa turned toward the stairs where Anna stood barefoot, holding her sketchbook. The girl approached, handing the book to Elias. On the page was a drawing of Lisa holding Elias's hand, with a caption in sign language, "I already asked her." Elias looked at Lisa, then at his daughter.
You knew.
Lisa nodded, her hand tightening around his, placing it over her heart.
I was just waiting for you to ask.
Elias laughed, then embraced them both. No wedding, no ring on her finger just yet, but their hearts understood from now on. Every melody would belong to the 3 of them.
Anna watched the adults, then stepped back, took the small stone she always carried, and etched onto the wooden wall near the fireplace, the day they promised never to part. The next morning, Bellwood remained blanketed in snow, but inside the small music shop at the edge of town, soft sunlight filtered through the frosted glass like a quiet smile from an early spring. Elias was the first to wake. He moved quietly to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Lisa slept soundly on the couch, her hair cascading over her shoulder, a blanket tucked gently over her. The firelight danced on her face so tenderly. Elias didn't have the heart to wake her. No one knew when Anna had gotten up. She was already at the drawing table, clutching her pencil, putting the finishing touches on a new picture. She didn't want to break the stillness, but she knew today was important, the day everything would feel whole. The drawing was of a small house, a piano sitting outside in the snow, and three figures, a man holding a guitar, a woman with a violin, and a little girl with her arms wide, gazing up at the sky. When Elias brought over 2 mugs of hot cocoa, Anna handed him the drawing. He looked at it, and his heart tightened. Not because of the lines on the paper, but because of what she had written in the corner, using her sign language symbols. I don't need magic. I just need Mum and Dad. Elias gently pulled his daughter close, too moved for words. Lisa, now awake, came over, saw the picture, and let out a soft laugh.
This little one that draws the future like it's already happened.
Elias looked at her, eyes softening.
Because in her world, anything drawn in love is already real.
Anna grabbed both their hands and placed them together like a tiny director commanding her scene. She signed, "Hold hands forever." Elias laughed, glancing at Lisa.
You see, she's not really giving us much of a choice.
Lisa nodded, squeezing his hand.
I never wanted anything else.
The 3 of them stepped out onto the porch. Snow was still falling, light and playful. Anna spun under the winter sky, wordless, but her eyes sparkled like a symphony reaching its crescendo. Elias and Lisa stood behind her, hands clasped, no talk of tomorrow, no echo of yesterday, just now filled with music, light, and the silent presence of a little girl who had spoken straight to their hearts without ever making a sound. Anna stopped spinning, bent down, and picked up a small stone. She carved 1 word into the wooden porch beam, family. That afternoon, Bellwood was hushed beneath a sea of snow. No cars, no footsteps. The town seemed to hold its breath, giving space to the sacredness of simple things. Inside the music shop at the end of the street, golden light spilled across frosted windows, painting warmth into the cold. Instruments rested on shelves like an audience waiting for a surprise performance. Elias was teaching Anna simple chords on her melodica. Lisa sat nearby, flipping through a worn notebook of sound sketches she had started back in music school. Each page turned like a chapter from another life, now being reread in the hands of a new family. At 6 o'clock, Anna stood, walked to the corner of the room, and pulled out the stone she'd carved a few days before. She stepped out to the porch and carefully placed it between the 2 older stones, one that read, "The day Dad first held Mum's hand," and another, "The day they promised not to let go." Elias came out and placed a hand on her shoulder.
What are you writing now, sweetie?
Anna signed, ending the first song. Lisa joined them, wrapping a coat around Anna's shoulders. They stood there, 3 figures under a snowy porch, facing a street so quiet it felt like the curtain had just fallen.
No one spoke. No one needed to.
In that moment, Elias reached for Lisa's hand and kissed her forehead. Anna looked up at the sky, smiling. Snowflakes kissed her skin. melting like the final notes of a love song. And then she carved one last line on the wooden wall beside the door. We lived happily not because we were lucky, but because we dared to believe in each other. Snow kept falling, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It was just the quiet sound of white notes, closing one chapter and beginning the most beautiful kind of symphony, the kind made of everyday love, where no words are needed and family doesn't have to be perfect to be complete.
If this story touched something in you, share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear what you felt, what you remembered, or simply what stayed with you. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel for more quiet, beautiful stories like this, tales that don't shout, but softly linger. Thank you for listening. Until next time.